All right, everybody, it's time to get deep. So far in this series, we've done a really high-level overview about the joyful again. So to recap, the joyful again is repeating something over and over again with joy. For the next few weeks, we're going to talk about the hurdles of fear, how to fail well, how to optimize the body for experiencing joy, and then we're going to get into the common objections that students have. So let's start today with hurdles. For a minute, I'm actually going to take that word really literally. What is a hurdle? So we had the Olympics this year. If you think about the Olympics, if you've ever seen the 100-meter hurdle, think of that as what a hurdle is. It's an obstacle that can trip you up when you're making really good progress. So I'll say it again. A hurdle is an obstacle that can trip someone up when they are otherwise making great progress. So I want to be really clear here because a hurdle is not a barrier. So no runner that hits a hurdle feels like they've just run into a brick wall. A brick wall is a barrier. It stops all progress really forcefully and completely. So examples of barriers for students would be lack of instruments, having nowhere to practice, or being so busy with activities that they don't have enough time in the day, or injuries, or in worst case scenarios, like major trauma at home, that sort of thing. Those are stop in your tracks barriers. So a hurdle isn't a barrier. A hurdle is an obstacle. You can get over a hurdle. It's there to trip you up, and it can, but it's not insurmountable. For today, we're going to focus on the most common hurdle that students face, which is fear. So the trick is, how do you first convince and then train your students to believe that fear is a hurdle that they can jump and not a brick wall barrier? In the second chapter of my book, Making Musicians, I get really deep into what it means to be brave as a musician. So let's talk about bravery for a minute. There is this common misconception that bravery is doing something scary, like objectively scary, and not being afraid of it. Actually, real bravery is being very afraid and doing whatever it is anyway. So what are students most afraid of? Failure. Often people are afraid of failure, and usually for good reasons. Failing, and especially failing publicly, makes a person very vulnerable. But vulnerable to what? Thank you for asking. I love it when you anticipate my questions. When a person fails, they are vulnerable to pain. The pain of rejection, the pain of harsh and unconstructive criticism, and the pain of ridicule. Which means, in order to deal with hurdles, you need to teach your students to fail well. So pause this video for a minute. You've probably heard of failing fast, but have you ever heard of failing well? So failing well means getting really good at not just enduring and not simply embracing, but even enjoying the kind of failure that improves you. I'll say it again because it matters a lot. Failing well means getting really good at not just enduring, not just embracing, but enjoying the kind of failure that improves you. Now, this is going to be a great topic to talk about in our groups. For now, what are the practical ways that you can help a student learn to fail well? So, the first thing is psychological safety. So without psychological safety, it is impossible to fail well. When a person has to be on guard for potential pain, they can't learn to enjoy good failing. So as usual, let's start with you. Do you feel psychologically safe when you fail? When, where, and with whom have you experienced being psychologically safe to fail? What can you learn from those experiences? And then, when, where, and with whom have you experienced being psychologically unsafe to fail? What can you learn from them? And then what is one thing you can do in your class tomorrow that can increase your students' sense that they are safe to fail? So the second thing to consider is getting clear on the kinds of failure, the different kinds of failure, because not all failures are equal. Do your students know that there are different kinds of failure? Okay, so this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but the most common kinds of failure to be really clear with students about are, first, simple mistakes. Example of these include a slipped note or a word in a piece that a student knows really well. These are easy to laugh about, and you really should be laughing at them with your students. More on laughing next week when we deal with the body. Then there's developmental failures. These kinds of failures usually come when a music student is trying to learn and execute something brand new that they haven't learned before, especially a physical skill. These kind of feel like whack-a-mole. In other words, developmental failures feel like they keep popping up at random places and that you can never really win. And they are exactly like that, except for the last part. Eventually, these developmental failures, they will all get whacked, and then they will fall into the category of simple mistakes. Show your students a video of whack-a-mole if they've never played it and explaining this kind of failure, and it will really help them. So finally, there is, and this is the worst one, failure to learn from mistakes. It's really insidious, and it's the one you want to teach your students to avoid as much as possible. Now, I haven't got much time left in this video because they tend to go long, but let's sit on this one for just a little bit. How do you teach your students to learn from their mistakes? So actually, the best way to do it, we actually covered last week. You make it part of your games. There's a video of this in action on our website. You can find the link in our newsletter or in the doobly-doo under the video on YouTube. What you'll notice is that at first, my student who is failing points at a very large area to show what they've done wrong. Because I asked her, what did you do wrong? And she goes, I got this wrong. You'll have to help your students figure out what they got wrong. You don't spoon feed them the answer, but you help them find the specific notes or the specific passages that they miss. So I would love to hear more from you about this idea of failing well. How is it hitting you? I'd love to help you really contemplate these ideas. So I've actually included a link for a free set of posters. We love free posters, which you can print off and use in your classrooms and your studios. I hope you'll also consider joining one of our groups because that's where we really dig into things. We're going to be starting groups in the winter as well as next week. So do go out and fill out our interest form in the section where it asks, what else would you like us to know? And tell us you'd like to join in the winter or in this next week in October. So I will see you in next week's video where we are going to talk about how to teach your students to get their body optimized for joy. Looking forward to seeing you next week.